What do you do when the life you've built in a foreign land suddenly no longer belongs to you? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. And if this story moves you, feel free to like and subscribe. Now, let me take you to a quiet office in the middle of a city that never slows down on the day everything changed for one woman. Her name was Elena Rivers, and for the past 10 years, New York had been more than a place, it had been home. Elena wasn't allowed about her success. She didn't need to be. As head of Aurora Books, she let her work speak for itself, always poised, always composed. But that morning, her hands trembled slightly as she ended a call that left her staring at nothing. Her visa renewal had been denied. She had 30 days to leave. The door opened softly. Noah Hale, her assistant, young, kind, and always one step ahead, walked in with a cup of coffee in each hand. He noticed her silence right away. "Alona!" She didn't look at him. Her voice came out like a whisper that had been sitting in her throat too long. "I need to get married." Noah blinked. "Sorry?" She finally turned toward him, her expression unreadable. "I don't want to go. I can So the only option left is marriage." He set the coffee down, careful, confused. "Do you mean now? With who?" A pause. Then she looked him in the eye. "You." Noah let out a quiet laugh, awkward, uncertain. "Elena, this isn't a joke, is it?" She didn't laugh. She just waited. He ran a hand through his hair, taking a shaky breath. "You're asking me to marry you. For a visa." "Yes. Elena." "That's not a small thing. That's not a favor." "I know," she said softly, "and I wouldn't ask if I had another way. I came here with nothing," she continued. "I gave everything I had to this job, this city. I'm not trying to cheat the system. I'm just trying not to lose everything." Her voice didn't break. But there was something fragile in it, like a window holding back a storm. Noah looked at her, unsure of what to feel. Pity? Worry? Compassion? "This could go very wrong," he said. "I know. We could get into serious trouble." "I'll take the risk," she said. "I just need you to take it with me." There was a long silence between them. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "I'll make it worth your while." A month of paid leave, all expenses covered, even the office playlist, yours every day. He managed the ghost of a smile. "You'd let me play that sad indie folk stuff you hate?" She nodded, just once, even that. He stood there, silent, for a long moment, then shook his head gently. "No, Elena." She let out a weary sigh, her patience thinning but her pride intact. "It's just a few months," she said quietly, her voice more pleading than defiant. "A few months of pretending. You don't even have to like me." But Noah had already turned, walking away faster than usual, as if he needed to escape the weight of her words. Left alone in the hallway, Elena crossed her arms and muttered to herself, "He'll come around." The next morning, the usual rhythm of the office returned: emails, coffee, footsteps, phones. Noah sat at his desk, sipping from a chipped mug, trying to steady his thoughts. When she appeared. No dramatic entrance, no instructions barked across the room. "Elena?" he asked cautiously. There was something different in her eyes today. Softer. "I need your help," she said. He blinked. "Wait, you are asking? Without shouting? Is this some kind of hidden camera thing?" "I am serious." "You just said serious." "Great. Now I am worried. Should I check if the sky is falling?" She didn't respond, just looked at him with a kind of quiet exhaustion, and something else, something like vulnerability. He should have said no. Every rational part of him was already forming a list of reasons why this was a terrible idea. But something about her, maybe the way she stood, not as a boss, not as a woman trying to win, but as someone simply holding on, made him pause. He sighed slowly. This is going to be a disaster. A flicker of a smile touched her lips, most likely, but I plan my disasters well. He shook his head, already regretting every life choice that brought him to this moment. The next morning, he was back at her desk, holding a folder full of logistics and questions he never thought he'd ask. She didn't even look up. Can you send that to legal and also set a meeting with the board for Monday? He waited, arms crossed. And the paperwork? She finally looked up, blinking as if she'd forgotten. Oh, that. I will take care of it today. He let out a short, dry laugh. What did I just agree to? You agreed, she said, returning to her screen, to be a part of a perfectly executed solution. He dropped into the chair opposite her. Okay, genius, what's next? Before she could answer, the phone rang. She picked it up, pressed speaker. Ms. Rivers? This is Agent Warren from the Immigration Services. Her posture shifted ever so slightly. Yes, Agent Warren. How can I help? Given the urgency of your recent marriage, we'll need to verify that the relationship is genuine. Noah glanced at her, eyebrows raised. She stayed still, calm. Of course. We'll begin with something simple, a weekend away, together, preferably somewhere personal with family. It helps us observe natural interactions. Noah straightened. A what now? It's a Z standard, the agent continued. Without that, your case might appear suspicious. Elena swallowed. And where? Exactly. What? Would you like us to go? I recommend Mr. Hale's family home. Familiar environment, honest setting. Her eyes widened. She turned slowly toward Noah, who now wore a small, ironic smile. Of course, he said. That sounds lovely. We are heading out this weekend, Noah said casually, a hint of mischief in his tone. Elena offered a polite smile, though her eyes betrayed something else entirely. Looking forward to it, she said flatly. The moment the call ended, she turned to him, arms crossed. Your family home? Her voice was low, as if she was holding back a scream. You've got to be kidding, Noah shrugged. You wanted the marriage to look real. What could be more real than meeting the family? She inhaled sharply, clearly trying to stay composed. All right then, what should I expect? He smiled, a bit too pleased. My grandmother? Sweetest woman you will ever meet. My parents are grounded, thoughtful people. My brother S, still in college, mostly just eats and sleeps. Pretty traditional household. Elena felt a little tension lift from her chest. That doesn't sound too bad. Noah's smile grew a little wider, but it wasn't a comforting smile. There is one thing I forgot to mention. Her eyes narrowed. What? They don't think I'll ever get married. Elena stared. What do you mean? I've always been the one who runs from anything serious. They think commitment isn't tea in my vocabulary. So you showing up is going to shock them. Elena ran a hand over her face slowly. Wonderful. Friday arrived, and they stood together at the airport gate. Elena clutched a small suitcase, neat and practical. Noah, on the other hand, had only a backpack slung over one shoulder, looking as if he were heading to a weekend at the beach. She raised an eyebrow. That's all you're rebringing? I still have clothes at the house, he said with a shrug. She muttered something under her breath about men and tugged her suitcase closer. The flight was uneventful. Elena sat quietly, while Noah chuckled at something on his phone, as if the whole situation didn't weigh on him at all. It was during the taxi ride through his hometown that she began to notice things. A furniture store, Hale and Sons. A cozy inn, the Hale House. A cafe with handwritten chalkboard. Owned by the Hale family since 1963. She squinted at the window, then turned to him. Do you have famous relatives I should know about? Noah grinned but kept his gaze on the view outside. Something like that. Something like that isn't an answer. Relax, he said, leaning back in his seat. You will find out. That didn't reassure her. When they finally pulled up to the house, Elena went quiet. It wasn't a house. It was a manor, elegant, towering, framed by wrought iron gates and an immaculately trimmed garden. Light spilled from wide arched windows, and the balconies looked like something out of an old novel. Elena blinked twice. Noah? Hmm? She turned to him slowly. You're, wealthy? He shrugged, smiling gently. My family's comfortable. She stared at him in disbelief. You have been working under me all this time, carrying folders and taking notes, while this was your life? I wasn't pretending, he said softly. I just chose something simpler for myself. Elena opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't have words. Before she could find them, the front door opened. An elegant older woman stood there, silver hair, swept into a classic chignon, her posture graceful but firm. Noah, she said warmly. He smiled and walked toward her. Hi, Grandma. They embraced, and Elena stood still, unsure what to do with her hands or her thoughts. Then the woman turned her sharp, intelligent gaze toward her. So, she said, with a half smile, you are the one who managed to capture my grandson's attention. Elena managed a polite nod, though her stomach had started to twist. I'm up from Elena. It's lovely to meet you. The woman stepped forward and gently looped her arm through Elena's. Well, come in then. Let's us see if you are everything the stories say you are. Elena let herself be led inside, feeling the warmth of the house around her. She had thought the hardest part of this whole plan would be pretending to love Noah. But in that moment, surrounded by real people, with real hopes, she began to wonder if pretending would be enough. Now came the real test, his family. Elena had stood in front of boardrooms, signed international deals, and led a company through crises, but nothing had prepared her for this. A weekend surrounded by strangers who just happened to be the family of a man she barely knew outside of deadlines and office chatter. And now, apparently, that man was also heir to a legacy she hadn't even known existed. As they stepped through the grand entrance of the Hale estate, Elena tried to compose herself, but her thoughts kept circling one relentless truth. He is not just an assistant. He is a millionaire. Beside her, Noah's grandmother still had her arm gently linked with Elena's, guiding her through the hall like a guest of honor. Come now, dear. I've waited too long to meet the woman who captured my grandson's heart. Elena cast a desperate look toward Noah, silently begging for some explanation something. He simply shrugged and smiled, completely at ease. Perfect. She was now playing the role of fiancé to a man who had carefully hidden an entire identity from her. The inside of the house was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings stretched above her like a cathedral. Crystal chandeliers sparkled in the afternoon light. Every room looked curated, warm, and impossibly elegant. It wasn't just a home. It was a legacy. In the center of the living room stood a poised couple who turned at the sound of their footsteps. Their eyes lit up as Noah approached. Mom, he said with ease, walking into a warm embrace. Elena stood back, awkward, feeling like a misplaced extra in a film she hadn't auditioned for. Noah Hale. She repeated the name in her head. It should have meant something to her. Now she understood why it didn't. He never let it. His father greeted him with a firm handshake and pride in his eyes before turning his gaze to her. So you are Elena, he said, studying her carefully. She nodded, offering a polite smile. Yes, it's lovely to meet you. His mother stepped closer and gently took her hands. Welcome to the family, my dear. Before Elena could respond, she was pulled into a warm embrace. The weight of expectation settled in her chest like stone. Noah's grandmother watched the exchange with folded arms and a thoughtful smile. Well then, Tell us everything. How did it all begin? The proposal? The moment you must share it with us. Elena froze. She hadn't prepared for this part. She looked toward Noah, silently pleading for him to lead. To her surprise, he looked amused. Well, he began, his tone warm and smooth. It started in the most ordinary place. At work. One day I looked across the office, and something just clicked. I knew I couldn't imagine a day without her. Elena nodded along, forcing herself to play the part. Noah's grandmother tilted her head. Charming. And how exactly did you propose? Elena held her breath. Oh, he said with a nostalgic sigh. I planned a quiet dinner, candles, fresh flowers. I got down on one knee, said her name, and she cried. Elena blinked. I cried? He looked at her, still smiling. Out of joy, of course. It was beautiful. She narrowed her eyes just slightly. So beautiful, I barely remember it, she said under her breath. His grandmother didn't miss the exchange. Is that so? She said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Interesting. Elena tensed. Is something wrong? Oh, not at all, the older woman replied sweetly. I just enjoy watching how couples tell their stories. It says a lot. Elena forced another smile, but something in her stomach twisted. This weekend wasn't going to be simple. After a few more questions and introductions to the rest of the family, Noah's grandmother finally clapped her hands together. Well, you two must be tired from the trip. I've had the guest room prepared. Elena exhaled, relieved. But then, actually, on second thought, the woman added, turning with a knowing look, you're a couple now, aren't you? You should share a room. The relief vanished. Elena turned to Noah slowly. And for the first time all day, he looked almost as nervous as she felt. Elena glanced at Noah, hoping he might say something to change the situation. But instead, he just offered that same easy smile. Of course, he said calmly, clearly enjoying every second of this. Oh, Grandma, he added, we really don't want to be a bother. His grandmother raised an elegant eyebrow. Nonsense. You re-engaged. Couples sleep in the same bed, don't they? Elena swallowed, her throat dry. Yes. Of course. Wonderful, the older woman replied, satisfied. Your room is at the end of the hallway. Elena forced a smile, but her thoughts were spiraling. This is getting completely out of hand. Noah picked up their bags as if it were the most normal thing in the world and began climbing the stairs. She followed, muttering under her breath. This wasn't a part of the plan. You knew it would be complicated, Noah said, calmly. I knew it would be complicated, she hissed. I didn't know your grandmother was going to conduct a full-blown investigation and assign us a shared room. He grinned. Welcome to the family. They stepped into the room, and Elena immediately noticed the soft lighting, the warm wooden tones, and the single bed in the center. She stared. Of course, there's only one bed. Noah dropped his backpack onto a nearby chair. We can manage. She folded her arms. You are sleeping on the floor, he raised an eyebrow. I am a gentleman, Elena, but I am also a negotiator. Let's be reasonable. Absolutely not. So, I take the bed and you get the floor? She exhaled sharply. Fine, we'll share. But stay on your side. I am drawing an imaginary line and you better not cross it. He held up both hands playfully. Understood. I'll stay in my corner. That night, Elena lay awake, unable to fully settle. She could feel the steady rhythm of Noah's breathing beside her, calm and undisturbed. He seemed so at ease, as if none of this fazed him, and that unsettled her more than anything. Was this just a game to him? The thought lodged itself in her chest like a splinter. The next morning, over breakfast, Noah's grandmother clapped her hands excitedly. We are having a dinner party tonight, a few close friends. They've all been dying to meet you both. Elena smiled politely, but a wave of anxiety stirred beneath her ribs. She could handle the family barely, but a whole crowd? People with sharp eyes and curious questions? She glanced at Noah, who was helping himself to coffee, like it was just another Sunday. He didn't seem worried at all. And that calmness, it was starting to feel dangerous. Later, just before dawn, Elena was startled awake by the sound of knocking on the door. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it hit her. She was at Noah's family home, pretending to be his fiancé. And worst of all, she'd shared a bed with him. She turned slowly and saw him still fast asleep, one arm dangling over the side, peaceful and utterly unaware of the chaos unraveling inside her. The knocking grew louder. "Noah, Elena, time to rise and shine," came his grandmother, a voice from the other side of the door. Panic surged in her chest. She leaned in and whispered urgently, "Noah, wake up." He groaned softly, turning onto his side. "Noah," she whispered again, poking his arm. He blinked, slowly waking, the morning light brushing over his face. "What is it?" "Your grandmother. She is at the door." He sat up sluggishly. And what if she walks in and sees us like this?" He gave her a half-asleep smile, still soft with sleep. "Well, that would only help sell the story, wouldn't it?" Elena wanted to throw a pillow at him. "You're not taking any of this seriously, are you?" Noah didn't get a chance to reply. The door swung open. "Good morning, lovebirds," his grandmother said cheerfully, as if walking in on an engaged couple, half-dressed, was the most natural thing in the world. Elena froze, completely. Noah, without missing a beat, slid an arm around her and smiled. "Good morning, Grandma." She felt herself stiffen under his touch, but forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh." "We slept wonderfully." His grandmother gave them a playful look and clapped her hands softly. "Lovely. We have got a full day ahead. Dinner tonight, of course. I want everyone to meet the woman who stole my grandson's heart." Elena could feel a bead of sweat tracing down the back of her neck. "Of course. I'm honored." "Well, I'll let you two get ready," the older woman said sweetly, though there was something sharp behind her gaze. "Come down when you're redressed." As soon as the door closed, Elena stepped away and turned to Noah, glaring. "Don't ever do that again." He blinked, feigning innocence. "Do what? Help us sell the story?" "This isn't a performance, Noah. This is getting dangerous." He stretched, entirely too at ease. "It's just dinner, with my extended family, and a grandmother who is clearly watching our every move," she huffed. "Exactly. Then let's give her nothing to doubt." Elena rolled her eyes. "Right. Because pretending to be your fiancé wasn't enough pressure. Now, I have to look madly in love with you too." He grinned. "You've got range. You'll be fine." She wasn't so sure. After breakfast, Elena barely had time to breathe before Noah's grandmother appeared at her side again. "I thought we could spend the day together," she said sweetly, but her gaze still held something more serious. "I'd like to get to know the future Mrs. Hale a little better." Elena's stomach dropped. This wasn't tidy quality time. This was a test. The first challenge? The garden. His grandmother handed her a pair of gloves and gestured toward a row of freshly dug soil. "Noah S. always loved gardens," she said softly. "I imagine you two share that." Elena stared at the plants like they were written in a foreign language. "Oh, yes, I love gardens." "Wonderful," the woman replied, handing her a small trowel. "Let's replant these roses." Elena knelt awkwardly, trying to follow her lead, but she'd never held a gardening tool in her life. Her hands were used to keyboards, not roots and soil. After several failed attempts, and a few wilted petals later, the older woman finally took a pause. "You really love my grandson, do you?" Elena looked up, her breath catching. A simple question. But beneath it, layers. Yes, she said carefully, very much. The woman tilted her head. And why? Elena hesitated. Why? She turned, catching a glimpse of Noah talking with his father under the shade of a tree beside some. He was laughing, completely relaxed, a version of him she'd never seen at the office. She realized, in that moment, how little she truly knew him. But also, how different he seemed here. Softer, lighter. He's good for me, she finally said. It was the only honest thing she could think of. His grandmother studied her for a moment, then gave a faint smile. I hope that's true. A chill passed through Elena's spine. She hadn't convinced her. Not yet. As dusk crept in, the house slowly came alive with warm lights and the sound of guests arriving. Dressed in a soft, elegant gown, Elena descended the staircase beside Noah, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The room was filled with friends, distant relatives, old family friends. Curious eyes turned toward her with polite smiles. She tried to appear calm, graceful, believable. Then the crowd parted just enough to reveal a woman with striking features standing near the fireplace, the familiarity in her gaze, the slight raise of her eyebrow, the cold, amused smile. Noah S.X. Elena recognized her instantly. The woman moved through the crowd like she owned the space, tall, radiant, perfectly poised in a crimson dress that clung to her like second skin. Her expression? Calculated, sharp, a hint of something bitter, hidden behind a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She walked straight toward them, her gaze fixed on Noah. It's been a while, she said smoothly. Noah gave a polite nod. Madeline. Madeline and S. eyes shifted toward Elena, lingering, studying. So, you are the fiancé, she said, with a half smile. Elena returned the gesture, though her own smile felt rigid. That's right. Madeline tilted her head slightly, like she was looking at a piece of art she didn't quite believe was real. Funny, Noah never mentioned you before. A cold ripple passed through Elena. She glanced at Noah, but his face remained unreadable. I like to keep my personal life private, he said. How noble, Madeline replied, her voice honeyed but dry. But tell me, Elena, how did he propose? Elena froze for a second. The story, the lie. Again? She forced her mouth into a smile. It was magical. Madeline crossed her arms, eyebrows raised. Details. Before Elena could answer, Noah stepped closer, resting a gentle hand at her waist. His voice, calm but firm, cut through the tension. We've told that story more times than I can count, Madeline. Let's not waste the evening repeating it. Madeline's eyes narrowed, her smile thinning. Of course, let's instead talk about how you gave up something real for someone none of us had ever even heard of until today. The words hit like stones. Elena gripped her wineglass, taking a long, steady sip to keep from reacting. Then Madeline turned directly to Noah. Tell me, are you really in love? The silence that followed was heavy. Elena's heartbeat thudded in her ears, and then Noah moved. He turned toward her, his hand reaching up to cup her face, and without a word, he kissed her. Not lightly, not out of duty. There was no pause, no awkwardness. It was deep, intentional, like he meant it. For a moment, the noise around them disappeared. The people, the music, the pressure, none of it existed. There was only the warmth of his hands, the press of his lips, and the sudden, terrifying realization that she was kissing him back. When he pulled away, Elena could barely breathe. Madeline looked stunned. Does that answer your question? Noah asked softly. Elena didn't know what to think anymore. The kiss had shaken something loose inside her, a line she hadn't realized she was dangerously close to crossing. She stood quietly while the party continued around them, But her mind had stopped on that moment. That kiss. It hadn't felt staged. It hadn't felt like a lie. He had kissed her like she mattered. And worse, she had wanted it to be real. She turned abruptly and slipped out onto the balcony, needing air, space, something to remind her of who she was before all this started. The night was cool, brushing against her skin like a quiet warning, but it wasn't enough to clear the fog. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Running away again? Noah's voice was casual, but there was something quieter underneath. She closed her eyes for a moment before turning to him. I just needed to get away from the questions. He leaned against the railing beside her. Then, I'll just stand here and watch you pretend you are not panicking. I'm not panicking, she snapped, a little too quickly. You left the room mid-conversation. That's panic. She exhaled, steadying herself. Noah. That kiss. What was that? He looked at her, the corners of his mouth turning slightly upward. Convincing, wasn't it? She felt warmth creep up her neck. Convincing? You kissed me like it... She stopped, not sure how to finish without revealing too much. He waited. Like it what? She swallowed hard. Like it was real. For a long second he said nothing. The usual spark in his eyes faded, and his face turned quiet. Serious. And in that stillness, Elena realized something she hadn't dared consider before. That maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one confused. What if it was real? Elena felt her breath catch. Just for a moment, time stilled. Noah. He laughed softly, but the sound felt like a shield, light-hearted, deflecting. Relax, he said, shaking his head. That was just for Madeline. She needed to be shut up. And come on, admitted it was a pretty smart move. Elena folded her arms, trying to ignore the strange mix of relief and disappointment. I should have slapped you, she muttered. He grinned. You still can, though that might make us look even more in love. Before she could answer, his grandmother appeared on the porch, arms folded, eyes quietly calculating. My dears, she said gently, you should come back inside. Lingering too long might invite suspicion. Elena nodded, forcing a smile. Weary on our way. The older woman didn't leave right away. Her gaze lingered on Noah. I want you to show Elena the estate tomorrow, she said. She should understand more about the world she's about to enter. Noah raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Her smile was gracious, but there was something guarded underneath. Absolutely. She'll be up to the hills soon, after all. A chill crept up Elena's spine, but she kept her posture still. It would be my pleasure, Noah replied, clearly amused. A romantic tour of the family legacy. What could be better? Elena smiled tightly. She already had a bad feeling. The next morning arrived too quickly, and over another breakfast, filled with polite questions and lingering stares, Elena reminded herself to breathe. Later, Noah took her into town. She followed him past shops, buildings, even an art center, all bearing the Hale name in one form or another. Hotels, restaurants, offices. It was everywhere. You've been working beside me for 3 years, she said as they walked, and I never knew any of this. Noah slid his hands into his pockets, his tone light. I didn't hide it. You just never asked. She shot him a sideways look. Oh, sure. I was supposed to magically guess my assistant had a secret empire. He smiled, unbothered. Most people treat me differently when they know. You didn't he... He stopped walking and turned to her, his voice lower. In fact, you treat me worse. Elena let out a short laugh. That's because you earned it, he chuckled. See? That's what I like about you. She didn't respond, not right away. Because, ridiculous as it sounded, she liked hearing that. They kept walking until they reached a quiet lake, its surface glassy under the morning sun. A wooden pier stretched gently into the water, framed by tall trees. Noah leaned against one of the posts, looking out across the stillness. Well, now you've seen it. My family's kingdom. Elena crossed her arms. All I've seen is that you all very rich. I still don't know anything about you. He glanced at her, then out toward the water. What do you want to know? She paused. The teasing dropped for a moment. This felt like the first time they were actually seeing each other. Why are you working under me, in a company you could buy twice over? His gaze remained on the lake. Because I needed to build something on my own, without their name, without their help. I needed to know if I was capable, just me. She hadn't expected that answer, and it landed with quiet weight. That's admirable, she said softly. He turned toward her with a grin. Say that again. I want it on record. Elena Rivers just complimented me. She rolled her eyes. Forget I said anything. They stood in companionable silence for a while, until a mischievous glint appeared in his eyes. Can you swim? He asked suddenly. She frowned. Yes. But I'm not dressed for it. Noah took a step back, smiling. That makes it even better. Before she could protest, he scooped her up and tossed her splash into the freezing lake. She gasped as the cold hit her, the sound of his laughter echoing from the pier. When Elena surfaced, gasping for air, her hair clinging to her cheeks and water dripping into her eyes, she found Noah doubled over on the pier, laughing like a child who'd gotten away with something outrageous. You're going to regret that, she shouted, her voice hoarse from the shock. He only grinned. I am counting on it. She swam to the edge, climbed out with slow, dramatic effort, and stood dripping from head to toe. Her dress clung to her skin, and every strand of hair was plastered against her face. That was a mistake, Hale. Noah laughed harder. You never let loose. Someone had to fix that. Something snapped in her in the best way. Without thinking, Elena bent down, scooped up a handful of cold, wet mud from the lake's edge, and flung it straight at him. It landed with a satisfying splatter across his perfectly white shirt. Noah looked down, then up at her, genuinely stunned. She crossed her arms, satisfied. Who's laughing now? He stared for a second, then, without warning, dove into the mud, grabbing her wrist and pulling her down with him. They fell together into the damp grass, laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Their clothes soaked, their hands muddy, their laughter echoing across the water. And for the first time since this entire charade had begun, Elena wasn't pretending. She was simply having fun. And that was dangerous, because it meant Noah Hale wasn't just part of a lie anymore. He was starting to feel like something real. She could still feel the weight of the mud on her skin and the cold fabric clinging to her legs as they walked back toward the estate. Beside her, Noah was equally soaked and dirty, though unlike her, he wore a proud, boyish smile, as if this had been the best idea he'd had all week. That was fun, wasn't it? He said with a sideways glance. Elena glared at him. If your idea of fun is throwing people into lakes and destroying perfectly good dresses, then yes, it was a dream come true. Noah laughed and pushed open the door to the estate. Worth it. But the moment they stepped inside, the sound of laughter vanished, replaced by a symphony of shocked gasps. There, standing like a portrait of disapproval, were Noah's parents, his grandmother, and Madeline. His mother's voice broke the silence. Oh my God, Noah! His grandmother gaze swept over them, head to toe, sharp and unreadable. What on earth happened? Before Elena could even try to come up with a reason, Noah flashed his trademark grin. Just enjoying a little quality time. His grandmother narrowed her eyes. In the middle of a mud field? He shrugged. Love works in mysterious ways. Elena wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. Madeline tilted her head, arms crossed. Her smirk was slow, deliberate. You two certainly make an impression. Elena cleared her throat and forced a smile. Well, there's a lot of love between us. Can always keep it neat. Noah's grandmother said nothing for a long beat. Then, softly, she turned and walked away. His father gave a polite but pointed nod. You should both clean up. Dinner tonight is important. A cold knot twisted in Elena's stomach. Another dinner, another test. More eyes, more questions. Upstairs, she shut the bathroom door behind her and stared into the mirror. She barely recognized the reflection staring back, not because of the mud or the mess, but because the line between what was real and what was performance was starting to blur. The danger wasn't the lie anymore. It was the feeling growing quietly underneath it. After a long, hot shower, she slipped into a black dress, elegant, simple, and made her way downstairs. Voices floated from the dining room, warm and distant. The moment she stepped inside, every eye turned toward her. The table was set, like a photograph from a luxury magazine, crystal glasses, shining silverware, linen napkins, folded with precision. The room held an air of refinement and history. And there, across the room, stood Noah flawless, in a dark suit, smiling easily as he chatted with guests. Elena paused at the threshold, her heart strangely heavy. Whatever this night held, she could no longer pretend her heart was entirely untouched. And of course, Madeline was by his side, hovering like a shadow that refused to fade. Elena took a steady breath, then crossed the room toward them. Before Madeline could speak, she reached for Noah's hand and laced her fingers through his with ease. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but deliberate. Noah blinked, caught off guard for a heartbeat, but then his smile returned like second nature. "Hey, love." Elena leaned in and pressed a kiss to his cheek. Slow and intentional, letting it linger just long enough for Madeline to see. Madeline's smile faltered. "You two are just adorable," she said, her tone laced with insincerity so thick. Elena nearly laughed, but Noah only nodded, amused. "Isn't it wonderful when love just finds you?" Madeline's grip tightened around her wine glass, and for the first time that night, Elena felt like she was winning. During dinner, she sat beside Noah, their hands interlocked beneath the tablecloth, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And yet, under the golden lights and polite chatter, she could feel eyes on them specifically. One pair. His grandmother never looked away. Then, with the soft tap of her spoon against her glass, the older woman raised her glass in a calm, calculated gesture. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, "to our lovely couple." Elena felt her throat tighten. Everyone raised their glasses. She followed, smiling faintly, but she knew this wasn't just a toast. This was a stage, a test. "Noah, dear," his grandmother continued, voice sweet but sharp, "why don't you tell us the exact moment you knew you were in love with Elena?" Elena nearly choked on her wine. She hadn't prepared for this. How could she? There wasn't a script for this kind of theater. But Noah, composed as ever, smiled and turned to her. "It was a very specific moment," he said, his voice lowering just enough to draw attention. "She walked into my office one afternoon and told me she needed me." Elena's breath caught. Because technically, that part was true. "That's when I knew," Noah continued, "that no matter what, this was someone I wanted to show up for." Again and again, a strange silence settled over the table, as if something real had broken through the game. His grandmother's eyes softened. "How beautiful," she murmured. Madeline scoffed quietly and took a long sip of wine, but Elena barely noticed, because something had shifted. And for the first time since this began, she wondered if Noah was still pretending. After dinner, as the guests were filtering out and polite goodbyes filled the room, Noah gently tugged Elena's hand, leading her down a quiet hallway, away from the noise. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice lower now, more grounded. She blinked. Yes. Why wouldn't I be? He tilted his head, watching her. Because you looked at me like what I said actually meant something. Elena didn't know what to say, because it did mean something, and that terrified her more than she was willing to admit. We need to be careful, she said at last. Careful about what? This, she whispered. He stepped closer, not touching her yet, just near enough that she could feel the heat between them. Elena, he said gently, tell me the truth. Are you still sure this is just a game? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out, because for the first time, she truly didn't know. Noah smiled softly, as if he could see right through her hesitation. He reached up and brushed his fingers lightly against her cheek, barely a touch, but it lingered in the air between them like something unspoken. When you know the answer, let me know. And then he walked away, leaving her alone in the hallway, her heart pounding out of rhythm. She stayed there, motionless, her thoughts louder than the footsteps around her. The lie had become something else, something dangerous, because now it wasn't clear where the pretending ended and where the truth had begun. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She tossed in her bed, haunted by the memory of his touch, his voice, the look in his eyes, and worst of all by the part of her that didn't want any of it to be fake anymore. Tried to quiet the thoughts racing through her head, but it was hopeless. She had always known how to separate things: work, life, feelings. Her career had been her anchor, her identity. Emotions were background noise. Love wasn't even a chapter in her story. But now, everything inside her felt scrambled, and it was all because of him. Noah Hale was undoing her. By the time the early light began spilling through the window, she gave up entirely. She slipped into her robe, walked to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on her face or so. Staring at her reflection, she whispered to herself, "You just have to make it through this weekend. Then everything can go back to normal." But the thought didn't bring the comfort it used to. Because what even was normal anymore? She got dressed and headed downstairs, hoping for a moment of quiet. Instead, she saw him, already at the breakfast table, already talking, and beside him, Madeline. Perfect. Elena straightened her posture, masking everything behind a practiced smile. "Good morning." Noah looked up, and his smile softened. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" She took the empty seat beside him. "Best night ever," she said dryly. "Couldn't have been more restful." Madeline offered a sweet smile laced with something sharp. "I was just telling Noah how surprised I was to hear he was engaged. He always said he wasn't the settling type." Elena reached for the coffee and sipped slowly. "Well," she said, her voice steady. "People change." Madeline tilted her head. "Do they, or do they just pretend to?" It wasn't he subtle. It wasn't he meant to be. Noah seemed to sense it, too. He reached out, placed his hand over Elena S., and laced their fingers together. "I've changed," he said. Elena froze, because for the first time, it didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded real. The rest of breakfast passed in heavy silence. Madeline kept her tone light, but every comment she made was edged with doubt. Elena tried to ignore it, tried to ignore the warmth of Noah's hand still resting over hers. But her heart beat too loudly. Then his grandmother sat down beside them. She looked entirely too pleased. "My dears," she said, her voice sweet and calm, "I have a little surprise." Elena felt something tighten in her chest. What kind of surprise? The older woman's eyes sparkled. "Ivy decided, I want to make this union official before you go back to the city." There was a moment of complete stillness. Elena's fork slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the plate. "I am sorry." "What?" His grandmother took a sip of tea, as if announcing a wedding over breakfast was as natural as asking for sugar. "I want a ceremony here. Tonight, just something small, intimate, family only. Elena almost choked. A wedding? The woman smiled. You are already engaged. Why wait? Elena's thoughts were spinning. She couldn't say no, not without raising questions. But agreeing? That meant stepping even deeper into a lie she was starting to lose control of. She looked to Noah for help, for protest, for anything, but he was sitting there, looking amused. Not shocked, not worried. He was actually enjoying this. Well, dear, his grandmother prompted gently. Elena forced a smile. I'd love to, but weddings take time to plan. I'd want it to be perfect. The older woman waved a hand. Don't you worry about a thing, sweetheart. I'll handle everything. Elena nodded, but inside, she was screaming. And just like that, the house erupted into a kind of chaos she had no say in. Staff hurried about, phone calls were made, flowers were ordered, family members popped in and out of rooms, discussing music, dresses, lighting, and all Elena could think was, this was never supposed to go this far. The estate had transformed into something unrecognizable. Staff moved swiftly through the garden, arranging flowers along the aisle and stringing soft lights through the trees. White linen-covered chairs, candles flickered gently in the afternoon breeze. Elena watched it all from an upstairs window, her heart growing heavier with every passing minute. Somewhere between disbelief and dread, she found herself in a pale, elegant gown chosen by Noah's mother. It fit her perfectly, almost too perfectly, as if it had been waiting just for this moment. She felt like she was sinking, inch by inch, into something she hadn't asked for. By mid-afternoon, she found Noah sitting in the study, looking too calm for someone about to walk into a fake wedding. She stood in the doorway, arms folded. Are you really not going to say anything about this? He looked up from the newspaper in his hands and offered her a smile, infuriatingly relaxed. About what? She nearly threw the cushion off the nearest chair. Noah, your grandmother is planning an actual wedding. Today. He shrugged as if it were the weather. Well, it doesn't really change anything, does it? Elena stared at him. How can you be this calm? He set the paper down and walked toward her, his expression softening. Because in the end, you'll go back to your world, and I'll go back to mine. She swallowed, hard, because as much as she wanted that to be true, some part of her already knew it wasn't Shaunti. Not anymore. That evening, dressed in white, Elena stood in front of the mirror. The silk of the gown shimmered in the light, delicate and precise. She looked like a bride, and for the first time, the idea of marrying Noah didn't seem completely ridiculous. It seemed dangerous, because it was starting to feel real. She took a slow, shaky breath, then stepped out into the hallway. Outside, the garden was glowing. The ceremony space was small, intimate, lit by candles and golden light. Family members filled the chairs, murmuring softly as music played. And at the front, beneath a canopy of flowers, stood Noah waiting. Her steps felt slow, dreamlike. Her heart pounded louder with each one. She no longer knew where the lines were, where the performance ended, and something else began. Noah looked at her with the kind of gaze that made it impossible to pretend. She was lost, and she knew it. The officiant welcomed them with a warm voice, then turned to Noah. Would you like to say a few words to your bride? Elena braced herself. Noah took her hand gently, his thumb brushing against her skin, grounding her. I never believed in love, he said. Elena's breath caught. Not really. I always thought it was something people made up to explain the chaos of their feelings. He paused, his voice lowering just enough to make the garden fall silent. But then I met you. Elena's chest tightened. You didn't try to impress me. You weren't easy to charm, but you made me see that sometimes something real can start in the most unexpected way. and it doesn't need to make sense. He looked at her, completely sincere. Today, standing beside you, I realize that love doesn't always arrive with certainty. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's terrifying, but it shows up anyway. The garden was still, and for a terrifying, beautiful moment, Elena believed him. The officiant turned to her. Elena, would you like to share a few words? She blinked. Her throat was dry, her mind a blur. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words weren't ready, because her heart was still catching up. Elena tried to gather her thoughts, but her mind was a blur. Every eye was on her. Noah's grandmother watched with quiet approval. Madeline stood off to the side, arms folded, her expression laced with doubt and simmering resentment. Elena looked at Noah, and suddenly she remembered. Not the grand gestures, not the fake story they had memorized. She remembered the little things, how he used to annoy her at the office with his constant sarcasm, how his comments always got under her skin, and how, strangely, she started to look forward to them. She remembered how he made her laugh when she wasn't supposed to, how, in the middle of all the pretending, he'd held her, as if it meant something, and how the way he looked at her was starting to unravel everything she thought she knew. She took a breath. It caught in her throat, but then she spoke anyway. You make me question everything. Noah's eyes flickered with surprise. He wasn't expecting that. I never thought a lie could feel this real. She continued, her voice trembling just slightly, but somehow you made it feel like something more. He didn't speak. He only squeezed her hand a little tighter. The officiant gave a gentle smile. Noah Hale, do you take Elena Rivers as your lawful wife? Without hesitation, I do. Baikitilab. See about this. A chill ran through her from the certainty in his voice. And Elena Rivers, do you take Noah Hale as your lawful husband? Her heart thudded in her chest. I do. Applause echoed softly around the garden, but Elena didn't hear any of it, because the moment Noah cupped her face and kissed her, it wasn't a performance. It wasn't for show. It was something real, and that terrified her more than anything. Later, the evening slipped into celebration. Dinner was served under fairy lights. Toasts were made. Guests laughed and clinked glasses. Elena smiled when she had to, answered questions she barely registered, and moved through the motions of a bride. But inside, everything was unraveling. Noah was becoming a problem, because Noah was starting to feel real. She stepped inside the house for a breath of air, hoping for a moment to herself. But the quiet didn't last. You really think you've fooled them all, dawned to you. Elena turned to find Madeline, arms crossed, eyes cold and sharp as glass. She sighed. I'm really not in the mood for this, Madeline. Oh, you will have to make time, Madeline said, stepping forward, because I know this is a lie. Elena's stomach tightened. I don't know what you were talking about. Madeline let out a humorless laugh. Noah is not the marrying kind. He's made that perfectly clear for years. And now suddenly he shows up with you, playing the perfect couple? Please. Elena kept her face unreadable. Sometimes people change. Madeline took another step forward, her voice low. I'll find the truth. And when I do, this whole performance will fall apart. Elena smiled. Just a little. Good luck with that. And she turned and walked away, not once looking back. But inside, she knew this was spiraling beyond what she could control. That night, finally alone in her room, exhaustion settled over her like a heavy blanket. She sat at the edge of the bed, toes brushing the carpet, breathing slowly. Then a soft knock, and the door opened. Noah stepped inside without a word. She didn't even look up. Noah, I need to sleep. He closed the door gently behind him. His voice was quiet, but firm. We need to talk. She rubbed her face, too tired to fight. About what? He stepped closer. About what's happening between us. Her pulse jumped. There was nothing happening. He gave a quiet laugh. Not mocking, just sad. No? He asked. Then tell me, Elena, tell me that what you felt out there, during that ceremony, was a lie. She looked at him, and she couldn't because she didn't know anymore. Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her voice had abandoned her. Noah stepped closer, just enough for her to catch the familiar scent of him, warm, steady, and suddenly far too intimate. Tell me, Elena, he asked, his voice soft, almost pleading. Was it a lie? She held her breath, because deep down, she knew if she spoke, if she answered, she would have to face something she wasn't ready to name. And the truth was, she didn't know anymore what was real and what had started as an act. Noah raised his hand and gently traced his fingers along her cheek, a touch so light it felt like a question on its own. If you tell me you felt nothing, he said quietly, I'll let you go. I'll never ask again. Her body shivered under his touch. She opened her mouth again, but the words still wouldn't come. He gave a small, knowing smile, one that held more sadness than satisfaction. That's what I thought. And then he turned and walked away. No explanation, no pressure, just silence. And 1,000 things left unsaid. Elena stood there, frozen. Then slowly, she sank onto the edge of the bed, covering her face with her hands. This couldn't be happening. And yet, it was. And there was no going back. The next morning, she woke to a strange stillness inside her, like something had shifted, quietly, in the dark. Maybe it was the way he had looked at her, or the way he hadn't waited for her answer, because he already knew it. Maybe it was that after the ceremony, after the vows, after the kiss, something inside her had stopped pretending. She stared at the ceiling for a long time, trying to ignore the tightness building in her chest. She didn't want to see him. Not yet. But avoiding him would only make things worse. After dressing, she walked downstairs into a house already alive with motion. Staff were moving quickly. The family was gathered in the living room, deep in conversation about the day ahead. Noah sat on the sofa, a cup of coffee in hand, legs crossed, looking perfectly calm, like nothing had happened between them the night before. When he saw her, he looked up and smiled gently. Did you sleep well? Such a simple question. But the way he asked it made her chest ache. Yes, she said, too quickly. A lie. His grandmother clapped her hands, drawing the room's attention. As you all know, she began, tonight is the annual Hale family ball. It's a long-standing tradition, and now that we have a newly married couple among us, this evening will be even more special. Elena felt her heart skip. A ball? She turned toward Noah, who only shrugged like he had expected her reaction all along. Oh, of course, Elena said with a tight smile. That sounds wonderful. Inside, she was panicking. A wedding had been bad enough, but a ball, an entire night of dancing, talking, pretending in front of people who already doubted her. She caught Madeline's smirk from across the room. This was going to be a battlefield. Elena leaned toward Noah. You could have told me about this. He took a sip of his coffee, unbothered. And miss that face? Not a chance. She crossed her arms. You are enjoying this way too much. He only smiled. Later, alone in her room, she stood in front of the mirror, slipping into the dress they had chosen for her. It was long, deep, sapphire, sleek, elegant, regal, the kind of dress worn by someone truly married to a man like Noah Hale. And that was what unsettled her most, because when she looked at herself, it felt too real. When she came downstairs, the house was glowing with soft light and anticipation, and at the entrance, Noah stood waiting, dressed in black, tailored perfectly, the very picture of composure. He looked up, and for a long, quiet second, He didn't say anything. He just looked at her. And in that silence, Elena felt her heart falter again. He stood by the doorway in a tailored black suit, every line perfectly fitted to his frame. When his eyes met Elena's, something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of surprise, or maybe something warmer. "You look incredible," Noah said, and for once there was no teasing in his voice. Elena felt a sudden wave of self-consciousness. She looked down for half a second before replying. "You don't look too bad yourself." He let out a soft laugh and extended his arm. "Shall we?" She hesitated. Then, almost without thinking, she slid her hand through his. The ballroom was aglow with golden chandeliers, crystal light cascading across polished floors and silk-draped walls. Everything shimmered, everything whispered of legacy, wealth, and control. Elena had never been to a place like this. As they entered, heads turned, eyes followed, and she could feel the weight of every glance, every whisper just beneath the music. A sudden marriage, no history, no story, only doubt. But then Noah reached for her hand, weaving his fingers through hers, steady and warm, and somehow her spine straightened again. The evening moved forward in a blur of polite conversations and champagne flutes. Noah stayed close, introducing her to guest after guest as his wife, his voice calm, his gaze steady, and the strangest part, it all began to feel natural. Then came the announcement. From the top of the staircase, his grandmother I's voice rang out gently. "As tradition holds, the newlyweds will open the dance floor." Elena's stomach dropped. Noah turned to her, smiling softly. "Do you dance?" She gave a half laugh. "I pretend to." He offered his hand. "Perfect. Pretend with me." She let him guide her to the center of the ballroom, every step echoing louder than the last. As the music began, he wrapped an arm around her waist, and for a moment her body was tense, too aware, too guarded. But then she let go, just a little. He moved with such ease, guiding her with care, never pushing, never rushing. Then, without warning, he leaned in and whispered, "You look beautiful tonight." A quiet shiver traced her spine. She looked up, met his eyes, and he didn't look away. And right there, in the center of a room full of people, Noah kissed her. But this kiss wasn't, like the others. There was no audience to impress, no plan to follow, no role to play. It was real. His hand cradled her face with a kind of gentleness she wasn't prepared for. The kiss was slow, lingering less like a declaration and more like a question, one she didn't want to answer. When he pulled away, Elena stood motionless. The room hadn't disappeared, but it might as well have. Noah gave her a quiet smile, the kind that carried too much meaning. Was that convincing enough? Elena couldn't respond, because for the first time, she wasn't as sure what was pretend and what wasn't tea. The music resumed, and the night carried on, but her mind stayed frozen in that kiss, in the warmth of his hand, in the terrifying possibility that none of this was acting anymore. And then Madeline appeared, her voice sliced through the air like cold metal. "So," she said, arms folded, expression sharp, "I saw your little performance in there." Elena turned slowly, her entire body going still. "What do you want, Madeline?" She smiled, cold and knowing. "I just want to understand something." "If you two are so in love," Madeline said coolly, "then why did I have to find out by accident that Noah was married?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes were razor sharp. "Why has he never mentioned you before?" Elena's pulse quickened. She tried to keep her voice steady. "We are private." Madeline stepped closer. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Or maybe you just don't have a story to tell." Elena felt every muscle in her body tighten. Madeline was circling the truth, too close. And Elena knew if she slipped, even just a little, it could all collapse. "Why are you so interested in our relationship?" Elena asked, lifting her chin. Madeline gave a small, condescending shrug. "Because none of this adds up. Noah never wanted marriage. He never even mentioned dating. And now, out of nowhere, he is madly in love with a woman no one has heard of until this weekend." Elena tried to keep her expression neutral, but her breath was shaky. "People change?" "Sure," Madeline said, folding her arms, "but not overnight." Elena opened her mouth, scrambling for anything that sounded believable. But before she could speak, a warm hand settled gently at her waist. Noah. He appeared beside her with a calm, steady smile. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Madeline straightened, but didn't move back. "We were just chatting." Noah turned slightly toward Elena, taking her hand. "Well, if there are questions about us, I'd prefer they be asked directly." Madeline gave a dry little laugh. "Oh, Noah, I've always understood you better than anyone else." Elena felt something stir in her chest, something warm and sharp, not anger, jealousy. Before Madeline could add anything more, Noah turned to Elena. "Would you like to go for a walk?" Elena nodded without hesitation. It was the escape she desperately needed. He led her quietly through the hall and out onto the balcony. The cool night air kissed her skin, and she exhaled, finally letting her shoulders drop. "She is going to figure it out," Elena murmured, voice tight. Noah leaned against the railing, watching her. "Only if we give her a reason to." She let out a bitter breath. "Feels like we already have." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What's bothering you more? That Madeline is suspicious? Or that you're starting to like all this?" Elena froze. She looked at him, ready to argue, but Noah stepped closer. "You can pretend nothing's changed," he said gently. "But it has." She crossed her arms, a feeble attempt at defense. "You're imagining things." He didn't flinch. "Then look me in the eye and tell me that kiss tonight was just acting." Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. The words refused to come, because they weren't true. Noah reached up and brushed his fingers along her cheek, slow and deliberate. "If you really believe this is still just a game," he whispered, "say it now, and I'll stop." Her heart pounded. This was her chance, her moment to rebuild the wall, to draw the line, but she said nothing, and in her silence, Noah found his answer. He cupped her face, steady and sure, and kissed her. There was no one watching, no script, no pretending, just him, and her, and Elena. She kissed him back. She pulled him closer, as if trying to hold on to something she knew she might lose. His warmth, his truth. And in that moment, nothing else existed. But that kiss, it changed everything. When they finally pulled apart, Noah's eyes held something Elena wasn't ready to name. A tenderness, a certainty, a question she wasn't ready to answer. "You're scared, aren't you?" he murmured. Elena looked away, barely able to breathe. This wasn't supposed to happen. Noah's hand found the back of her neck, gentle and grounding, but it did. She closed her eyes, her heart beating out of rhythm. "Noah?" But before she could say anything more, a voice sliced through the silence like cold wind. "Well, that explains a lot." They turned sharply. Madeline stood at the entrance of the porch, arms folded, a wickedly satisfied smile curving her lips. Elena's stomach clenched. "So," Madeline continued, her tone mocking, "this is what true love looks like? So tense, so full of secrets." Elena opened her mouth, but her thoughts were a storm too loud, too fast. Madeline chuckled and took a step closer. "Don't to worry. I don't need evidence to know this whole thing is a lie." Elena's breath caught. But then Madeline's gaze shifted sharp and unrelenting toward Noah. You know what's funny, though? She said. You don't look like you were lying anymore. Noah said nothing, and that silence was all Madeline needed. She turned with a triumphant smirk. I don't have to expose anything. The truth is already leaking through the cracks. And with that, she was gone. Elena Schunbass' whole body trembled, because for the first time, she realized the lie no longer made sense. And even more terrifying, she didn't want it to. Noah, you're misreading this, she whispered. He gave her a quiet, knowing smile. Then look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing, she tried. But no words came, because she knew she had fallen. And if she said it aloud, there'd be no turning back. I need to think, she said softly. And then she walked away, heart racing, lungs tight, 1,000 unsaid things stuck in her throat. The days that followed were a blur. They returned to the city, and Elena threw herself into work. Meetings, emails, deadlines. She hid behind her laptop, behind her schedule, behind everything familiar, but nothing worked. She missed him. Not just his presence, but the way he saw her, the way he made her feel alive again, seen. Then one day, he didn't show up at work. She brushed it off, told herself he probably had errands or meetings, but as the hours passed, something inside her began to unravel. When the secretary handed her a short message, Noah Hale has resigned effective immediately, Elena's world tilted. She didn't think. She grabbed her bag and left the building. She had to find him. She couldn't lose him now, not without telling him the truth. She drove to his apartment. The doorman gave her a puzzled look. He left this morning. Bags packed. Said he was going away. Panic set in. She tried calling. No answer. And that's when she knew she was losing him. Really losing him. So she did the only thing that made sense. She went after him. It didn't take long to follow the trail. One mention here, one airline notification there, until finally, the airport. She ran through the terminal, scanning each screen, each gate until she saw him. He was just steps away from boarding. Elena, she called out, louder than she expected, loud enough for people to turn. He stopped. Slowly, he turned. His eyes widened when he saw her. She stood still, breathless and terrified, but more certain than she had ever been. I'm a coward, she said clearly, not caring who heard. I ran because I didn't know how to handle this. A few heads turned, but Elena's eyes were only on him. I didn't know how to handle you. I was afraid of love, Elena said, her voice trembling. But now I know. Noah didn't move. His eyes searched hers, waiting. I love you, she said, her heart in her throat. I love you. For a heartbeat, everything stood still. Then he smiled. Without hesitation, he dropped his suitcase and ran to her. Elena met him halfway, and when they collided, it was like gravity had finally done what it was meant to do, pull them home. Noah wrapped his arms around her and kissed her, right there in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by strangers who would forget the moment the next day. But for Elena, nothing else existed. There was no more pretending, no more acting, just them. When they pulled apart, Noah cupped her face, his forehead gently resting against hers. I was waiting for you to say that. Elena laughed softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. And now? He smiled. Now we do it right. Her heart beat wildly as she tried to take it all in. She had just confessed her love in an airport, in front of 100 people. She had run through terminals and broken every rule she once lived by, but none of it mattered, because she was exactly where she was meant to be. Noah brushed her cheek with his thumb. Elena Rivers, UV officially shocked me more than anyone ever has. She laughed again, unable to stop the emotion rising in her chest. You taught me how to be brave, Noah's smile deepened. In that case, he said, reaching into his coat pocket, I think it's only fair I do one more crazy thing." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" He took a step back and pulled out a small box. Her breath caught, and then he dropped to one knee. Right there. Right in the middle of it all. "I already married you once?" He began, his voice quiet but sure. But it wasn't he real. Not really. Elena's eyes welled again. Noah looked straight into her soul. "But now I want to do it the right way. No lies, no contracts, no pretending." He opened the box. Inside, a ring. Simple, honest, timeless. "Elena Rivers," he said, "will you marry me for love? For real?" She didn't even pause. "Yes," she breathed, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, the crowd around them erupted into soft applause. But Elena didn't hear any of it. All she saw was him. All she felt was his hand slipping the ring onto her finger. All she knew was this. And then he kissed her again, deeper, truer than ever before. This time, nothing was held back. This time, it was everything. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in front of a tall mirror, dressed in ivory lace. Her gown flowed like a whisper, the veil cascading down her back like soft moonlight. She barely recognized herself, not because she looked different, but because she had changed. For the first time in her life, she wasn't pretending. There was a quiet knock at the door. Noah's grandmother stepped in, elegant as ever, eyes gleaming. "I knew," she said simply, "from the beginning." Elena smiled, her heart soft. "You always knew more than you let on, didn't you?" The older woman winked. "Sweetheart, I may be old, but I'm not blind." Elena laughed, holding her hand for a brief moment. "Thank you. For everything." The woman nodded gently. "Now go. Your groom is waiting." Outside, the garden had been transformed. Rows of white flowers lined the aisle. Soft lights hung like stars overhead. And at the end, Noah, dressed in a perfect suit, his hands folded, his eyes full of something that made Elena want to run toward him. But she walked, step by step, toward the life she never dared to dream of. When she reached him, he took her hands. And in a voice only she could hear, he whispered, "You look beautiful," Noah whispered. Elena smiled through the quiet storm in her chest. "You don't look too bad yourself." The ceremony began, the officiant's voice soft and rhythmic. But Elena barely heard a word. Her heart was pounding so hard, it echoed in her ears like a quiet drum. And then Noah took her hands. His grip was steady, warm, real. "Elena," he began, his voice raw and unshaken, "you came into my life like a storm, uninvited, unplanned, unstoppable. And before I knew it, I was standing in the middle of something I never saw coming." She smiled, fighting the tears rising behind her eyes. "You taught me that love doesn't need to be perfect to be real. It doesn't need a plan. It just needs a moment. And that moment was you." Elena's chest tightened. Every word hit something deeper than she expected. "And now," he finished, eyes locked with hers, "I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it." Then it was her turn. She took a slow breath, feeling the weight of every version of herself that had come before this moment. The guarded one, the distant one, the one who never believed in more. "Noah," she said softly, "I spent so much of my life running from love. I told myself I didn't need it, that it would only get in the way." Her voice wavered, but she kept going. "But you made me believe in something bigger than fear. You made me believe that maybe I could have both purpose and peace, that I could be whole and still have someone beside me." Noah's eyes shimmered. "You taught me that love doesn't make you weaker. It makes you softer, and softness is its own kind of strength." The officiant smiled gently. "Noah Hale, do you take Elena Rivers as your lawful wife?" "I do," Noah said without a pause. And Elena Rivers, do you take Noah Hale as your lawful husband? Elena looked at him, her voice steady and clear. I do, the officiant beamed. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Before another word could be said, Noah leaned forward and kissed her firm, full of light, and without hesitation. Applause broke out around them. But for Elena, the world had quieted. There was only him, and in that stillness, something inside her healed. She had spent her whole life trying to control the story, to write every chapter ahead of time. But love had never been about the perfect plan. It had been about the unexpected pause, the unguarded glance, the one person who looked at her and saw everything. In the end, love didn't come to her like a fairy tale. It came quietly, unannounced. It came in the form of a person who made her laugh, challenged her, stayed close, even when she pushed away. It came when she stopped pretending she didn't need it. And maybe that's the most honest kind of love there is, not the one we chase, but the one we finally allow ourselves to receive. Thank you, from the bottom of our hearts, for staying with us through this story. Your presence, your time, and your open heart mean more than words can say. We hope this journey touched something deep within you, whether it was a quiet ache, a forgotten dream, or a hope you didn't know you still carried. Love, in all its imperfect forms, reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones we never planned for. If this story brought you comfort, made you smile, or helped you feel less alone, then it has done its job. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and keep believing in unexpected magic. With love, the Shining Stories team.